Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Everyone, and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. I'm your host, Janet Carolesson, with my co-host, Reverend John Polk, and we have a very special guest today, Michael Rhinehart, and he is a part of, or the creator of, I'm not sure exactly, of the Mars Anomaly Research Society. And this is an episode of the Anomaly Network, part of the Aquarian Radio Network of shows. And today is October 2nd, 2015. And John, my co-host, is here. We are waiting for Louis to show up, and we're going to just talk a little bit about tonight's episode. First of all, let us have John read Louis's bio. Take it away, John.
Louis Michael Rhinehart. Louis retired in 2010 from a company he owned called Sound Hearing Solutions. He was a hearing aid specialist and spent 18 years as an HAS, owning his own company since 2004. Louis was born on May 22nd of 1951, and since his mid-20s, Louis has been very interested in UFOs and aliens, etc. And in essence, he became a ufologist, reading all he could on the subject. At the same time, Louis became very interested in all things spiritual, with the main focus on NDEs. September 11th, 2001, or more famously known as 911, was the catapult for his true awakening, as it was for so many others. Rhinehart knew instantly when he saw a tower fall that something was not right. This was the beginning of his research into the truth, into all things. Regarding Louis's work with Andrew Basiago, he was researching child prodigies when he was prompted by YouTube to view Borskika, the Boy from Mars, an interview by Project Camelot. He was then prompted by Andrew Basiago's paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars. Louis did not find the paper, but on January 8th of 2009, he responded the same day directing him to his paper. Louis downloaded the paper, printed it, and absorbed all the information. Understanding that he was fully aware that we are not alone, but the last thing he thought was that Mars was inhabited. Louis then proceeded to download Spirit Rover image PIA 10214, the image that Andy based his paper on, and not only found what he did, but so much more. He communicated with Andy regarding this and begun to work on analyzing Mars and its orbiter images. After a short while, Andy invited Louis Rhinehart to be an official photo analyst for Mars, the Mars Anomaly Research Society. A little more than a year later, Andy appointed Louis as VP for Science and Education for the Mars Project. This year's Mars conference, and due to circumstances, this is going to be the first one in which Andy will speak. The 4th annual Southeastern Mars Conference will be held in Mobile, Alabama, at the University of South Alabama. The conference will be held in the Terrace Meeting Room in the Student Center building. Andy will be speaking from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., set aside Saturday, October 24th, 2015. A time to hear Andy speak all about Mars. and this will only happen with your support. This one-day event will include lunch for all, and the cost is $100 per person. If you have a group of 3 or more attending, the cost will be $80 per person. Send a check or money order to MARS-LMR at 4260 Grand Bay, Wilmer Road, South Mobile, Alabama, 36665. And that's an introduction to Louis Michael Rhinehart.
Thank you. And I think we do have Louis here. I'm going to click his button on just a second here. I just wanted to say that anomaly hunting has become quite the pastime, especially when it comes to the planet Mars. Today we are talking to members of the Mars Anomaly Research Society, especially Louis, about important findings this year, and also the upcoming conference in Mobile, Alabama, October 24th. And let me see if this is Louis. Hi, Louis. Do we have you on the line? Hello? All right. It's not happening. I'll try calling him again. Louis, are you there one last time? Okay, I will hang up. I might be on his voicemail for all we know. Okay. Well, let's talk for a little while. We'll give him a chance to show up. And what I wanted to address was some of the things that you said when reading the bio. Let me go back to that 1 second here. What he said was he became interested in extraterrestrials. Where was that? He started very young researching it. He was born in 1951 in May, and he'd been very interested in UFOs and aliens. In essence, became a ufologist, just reading all he could on the subject. Many of us do that. I can remember as a young child, my first book I read, very, very first book I read, it was a full book, not one of those little children's books, was Star Girl. And it's out of print. I tried to find it to reread it. It was fabulous. It was about this little girl that was left on the planet Earth, and she was adopted or taken in by a family, but she kept saying, "I'm from the stars," and they never believed her until one day a spaceship landed in the field, and her Earth family witnessed it, and they saw her get on the craft and go back to her other family. And that was probably around 1963, 2 or 3, maybe, 62 or 63. I know it was 8 or 9 when I read that book. And the skies of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised, was full of UFOs. So that definitely, I know there were things going on in my room, and I have a long history of contact, but on this other level where I was engaging other people, that definitely started for me in probably the early to mid-'60s, where I started talking about it with other kids in my neighborhood and my older brother and his gang that he would hang out with, and we started watching the skies. So what was your early childhood like, and how did you get started? I know you had some episodes, but were you curious as a child about life on other planets and the stars, John?
I was. I love to look and marvel at me.
Probably a little bit of a bad connection with you before you go on. Are you somehow, for some reason, I've had better connection with you before. You're coming in kind of garbled. Are you on Skype?
No, I can call you right back. Sometimes I'll just get a bad signal. I can call you back if you want me to. I can do it
now
immediately.
You're good. Now you're good.
Better.
Okay. You're good, though. You're good now. It was something maybe where you were standing or something. Are you on a cell phone?
I'm on my cell phone.
Okay, so wherever you're standing now, you're coming in clear. Go ahead.
Anyway, as a child, I would say my first memory, I was probably 5 years old, out on the beach at night with my family, my parents, my little brother. We're looking up at the skies at 1,000,000 points of light on a perfectly clear night on the ocean was Ponce Inlet, which is actually south of Daytona, right on an intercoastal with a jetty that goes right out into the Atlantic Ocean. It was just the perfect backdrop for UFOs, and can't say that I can honestly remember seeing anything at that time, but my mind started to think very abstract thoughts of, if we're a point of light in the sky as well, doesn't that mean that we're not the only ones standing on a star? There's got to be other beings on other stars throughout this vast universe. As a kid, Star Trek and Star Wars, George Lucas and Gene Roddenberry were on something. Their knowledge of absolutely, and I used to love it. My parents would get me Star Trek coloring books, and it made me want to be on the Starship Enterprise. Your mission to explore and go boldly where no man has gone before. And I just loved outer space. And then a number of years later, Mario Casar came out with the movie Stargate, starring James Spader, Kurt Russell. And you got to think it's very similar to the Anunnaki story. Very similar. They made a slave race out of the indigenous, who they probably created, a primitive race, Earthlings, to mine the ores and minerals out of the planet that they used as a power source. And it's very similar to the Anunnaki epics also. There's something to it. Mario Casar, Gene Roddenberry, George Lucas, they all were receiving downloads of information. Unless you can just dream that up without some kind of source, then it's coming from somewhere else. Compare that with their own intellect and creative ability. Spunnies and stories and, let's say, movies after movies. And I just have been fascinated with outer space and the whole. It all started from childhood, just like yourself.
So have I. I was just obsessed with it, and there is a correlation behind the obsession and contactees, abductees, experiencers. Before we go, I want to just double check. Lewis, do we have you on air? Lewis, are you there? Can you hear us? Okay, I'm not sure what's going on with Lewis. Trying to get you on the show, and we don't hear you. And I think I have you. I've called your number, and it looks like you're on the board, but I'm not sure what to do. How about I'm going to hang up your number, Lewis, and if you are really hearing us, would you please call 646-649-0893? Maybe if you call into the board, we'll be able to pick up your call and have you online. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but do call us at 646-649-0893. Okay. Well, sometimes things happen. There's not much we can do. So we were talking about Gene Roddenberry and all the early ones like Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein, the authors. I used to go to conferences with J. Allen Hynek and Gene Roddenberry and all the Star Trek people, and it just seemed like they knew it was going on, and that's why it came out the way it did, and especially Star Trek. I was a bit disappointed with Star Wars. It started out such a positive message, and then it just seemed to be a lot of extreme violence and commercialism. And I know they're going to be doing a reboot of Star Wars. I'm not sure when that's coming out. I keep missing that. I hope that they go back to the original spirit of the first 3 movies of Star Wars, which was the first trilogy. But I'll ask my wonderful computer here, when is Star Wars coming out? But these early researchers, I think they were delivering us a message because they weren't allowed to be disclosing it, or the early ones definitely, they would find themselves dead if they disclosed things. That was very common. But that seems to be what happened in the 60s and the 50s. We had all these other experiencers going on board ship, like George Adamski, and they were telling that generation about this whole contact, and then the energy kind of shifted. Did you notice that, and what are your thoughts on that, John?
Pardon me. I was born in 1969, so I can't exactly speak to that. I really didn't get into it until, I don't know, really the late 70s into the 80s. But it took off from there, that's for sure. And on one of your shows in the past, where I spoke of living on the ocean and seeing grays come through the sliding glass door of our condo, and then me being taken up on the ship. And then shortly after that, I started writing award-winning poetry, and the title of my book was entitled Beyond Oblivion, Through the Crevices in Between. And most of it was about me writing about getting to the other side. And I modeled some of my lyrics after Jim Morrison's lyrics and Ozzy Osbourne. As controversial as Ozzy Osbourne was, a lot of his lyrics dealt with traveling through the astral plane, couldn't shoot, and said, "I'd show you how." I love his lyrics before he got into biting off his head and things like that. He was very, very spiritual and, very in touch with the other side, because in effect, the lyrics of a song, not always in today's music, but back then with more poetry. And, with Pink Floyd and Zeppelin and Jim Morrison, those lyrics inspired me, along with also that experience encounter taken up onto a ship when I was, a teenager growing up on the ocean. And it changed my life forever, and it has sculpted me into the adult I am today, and has influenced my writing and the direction that my spirit is going. And I can remember when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, my mom was explaining to me living in a quantum reality where we had a multidimensional existence, which goes back to the movie series The Highlander. Can you remember Highlander?
Yes, I remember, although I don't think I saw it was a television series, Highlander. I think it's a movie or something similar.
It started as a movie. I think I had one or two of them.
Breaking up again. I wonder if you can just try walking around, maybe we get a better signal.
I'm sitting in the same place. I have intermittent signal issues at my house, so.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll live with it. And my apologies to. Well, but I'll slow you down when it's starting to sound garbled to me, so we don't miss important points. Okay, back to you. Go ahead. You were saying about Highlander.
So the basic premise of Highlander is that he lived a multidimensional existence. But the difference in what I believe and the difference in the movie was that he was himself, an exact replica of himself in perhaps 9 or more dimensions. And every time anything would happen in one dimension, to him, it would affect all of his other selves in all of the other dimensions. And as a 7-year-old, I was able to understand this concept. And my mom explained to me that it's not just a movie, that your soul, when I understood the concept of a soul, because it came from God, and since God is omnipotent, he gave me part of his omnipotence, which is called my soul or my God self. And so since he's omnipotent, I'm omnipotent also, so I can live on multiple dimensions at the same time as well. But the difference is that I don't look exactly the way I do on all these different dimensions. In another dimension, I could be a woman, or I could be a king, or I could be a queen, or I could be a slave, or I could be a warrior, or I could be crippled. And that was the hard curve kind of cyclical soul education that my mom taught me when I was 7 years old. And I actually understood it. And I've based my whole life philosophy on the fact that I live in multiple dimensions at the same time, and I've known and understand this reality since I was a child. And some of my good friends to this day, you know, who may make lots of money and have prosperous careers, they can't even begin to fathom that concept, which is okay, you know, and it's okay. You know, not everybody's going to understand everything, but it's something that I've known, and it's helped me manifest into the spiritual being that I am to this day.
Well, that's fascinating, because most people can't get their heads around that awareness that we are multidimensional selves having human experiences and many other experiences, and that we are extraterrestrial, but we're also human as well. And so that's very advanced topological thinking, as they say in the A.R. Borden Thinkage Institute. And that is where you re-empower yourself and are able to be the co-creator with Source and to be more in charge of your life than if you were just going through life victim and not aware of the nature of existence and how. So I really applaud you for that. I'm not sure when I came to that awareness. I don't know if I kind of always had it on a subconscious level, but I wish I had a mother that I could have had a conversation like that with, because I might have gone a lot further. You know, your mother, it sounds like she's really an amazing person. I'd love to talk to her sometime.
Oh, well, we spoke the other day, and I told you if you ever got to talk to her, it'd be like you were long-lost sisters, and you'd probably talk for a few hours minimum, and you would feel like you've known her for many lifetimes, which you probably have. I'm positive one day. You know, I'll set it up so you can open a dialogue with her. Your mom.
Love to have her on the show sometime. I think she'd be great if she would agree, but she doesn't have to use a real name. Nobody has to use a real name if you're, you know, afraid of losing a job or anything like that, or, you know, getting ridiculed by your community. We're not here to make you feel uncomfortable. We just like to talk about the concepts and the information, and there are so many people that are coming out of the closet. We had yesterday. We had the Experiencers Liberation Day, and so we invite people. And this continues. It's not just one day. We invite people to come out of the closet and share their extraterrestrial, interdimensional, and paranormal experiences. Those experiences that are outside the box. Because the more people that do that, well, first of all, we expand our awareness of what reality is and what is really going on. And a nice side effect is we become conscious, aware, and eventually enlightened, and we create a better reality, a better existence for all beings, all creatures, and the features of this planet. So I totally encourage that. To check back and see, well, we didn't get our guest, but we'll go for a little bit here more, and then we will try to reschedule him another day. I'm sorry for those who are tuning in. We had agreed to do this with Michael Rhinehart, but he might have some confusion in the schedule. Anyway, we're here. We are dealing with many timelines, and this happens sometimes, and so we will do what we can to get him rescheduled. Let me go back. I had another question. Well, I'm not actually the expert on Mars. I was going to have Lewis explain what's going on Mars, but one of my dear friends is Andrew Basiago, and I don't have my calendar here right at this second. I think he's going to be on as our special guest in about 2 weeks on the Sacred Matrix, my tongue, show on Sunday, which we broadcast from 8 to 10 Eastern. But what do you know about Mars? Have you encountered anything about Mars in your research? Have you ever been to Mars, with one of the extraterrestrials? Any insight on Mars?
In my estimation, we both have been there because of our connection with the Anunnaki. And it's interesting that, the Egyptians named Cairo, but Cairo actually means Camp of Mars. which I found very interesting in my research for specifically the show. To be able to hang with individuals like Lewis Michael Clark and Brett Colin Shepard, who've been studying Mars for 20, 30 or more years. I wanted to brush up, so I did a lot of studying. And another interesting fact I discovered was the Maya's Dresden Codex has a calendar that tracks Mars through the 780-day synodic period, which is the time period it takes for Mars to get back to the same place on the horizon from a human perspective on Earth, which I found incredibly interesting. And then there's a PhD, Dr. John Brandenburg, who wrote a book called Life and Death on Mars, and he spoke of an impact crater in the Leo region of Mars that's 125 miles in diameter. It's a double-ringed crater, and when this crater hit Mars, potentially millions and millions of years ago, more than likely, it stripped Mars of the atmosphere that it had. So in the past, it was wet with oceans and more Earth-like. And then after this event, it pretty much stripped their atmosphere away. And at that time, the Anunnaki were using Mars as not only a colony, but as, in effect, a way station on their way to Earth and back and forth from Earth to Mars to Nibiru and then back and forth again. And so the Viking rover back in 1976, they took a thimbleful of the Martian soil, and according to an experiment conducted by Dr. Gil Levin through NASA, he was a NASA employee, by the criteria laid out by NASA, they actually found microbial life by extracting samples from the soil, putting it in a contained environment, and seeing if the microorganisms were actually breathing. And just like humans respirate, so do microorganisms. So what they do is they search for carbon dioxide bubbles, because just like we go through oxygen and carbon dioxide cycles, so do microorganisms. So they were looking for traces of carbon dioxide to prove that they were actually breathing. And they actually found proof of life in 1976. And then after that, NASA, I think, was kind of shocked that it would be that easy and that quick and convenient. So they changed the experiment and adjusted the sensitivity to where you needed millions of parts per whatever for it to prove life versus only 50 parts per whatever unit of measurement. And so this gentleman, Dr. Gil Levine, back in 1976, he's authored books and has just been outspoken about it. But in the end, NASA will not acknowledge there was ever life on Mars. And what kills me is that this recent discovery of water on Mars, well, we discovered ice on Mars, a couple decades ago. So ice is water that's frozen. So this discovery of water on Mars is very old. And I don't see why they're trying to sensationalize it and make it into a big deal when this is really old news. It's very old news.
They're just trying to protect their assets, haha. Because
asset.
Mars base has been there all along, and you and I are both aware of the Anunnaki history. And Mars base was first established when Nimrod came through 450,000 years ago on the way to the Earth. Her father Anu sent her to check to see if Anzu and Alalu were still alive, and Alalu had died, and Anzu she was able to resurrect him. She was like a doctor, a scientist, and she was able to resurrect him. And then she built a monument on Mars, which is the one that Richard Hoagland and the Viking probe discovered. Richard Hoagland made famous in the whole city of Cydonia. And then she left behind an initial group of astronauts she brought with her, 20 as a way station, because they were here to retrieve gold from the Earth and send it back to Nibiru. And they would take smaller groupings of gold up to Mars, where I think they processed it into, refined it and processed it, and then they prepared it, and they would have a larger ship come through and take a larger batch of gold back to Nibiru, which they were using to create a shield for their atmosphere because they had kind of screwed up the planet, much like we're doing to ours, and their ozone layer was depleting. And also they had discovered they could use gold when it's processed into monatomic gold as part of their anti-aging protocol, so that they could stay young and be physically immortal. They're very addicted to being alive in physical form for as long as possible. And we're not sure exactly how old they are. We know that Enki and Alalu came to Earth 400,000 years ago, but we have no real idea how long they had been alive, but they were definitely not children. They were adults. We don't know exactly how long it takes for an Anunnaki child to grow to be an adult. So, then, let's see, what I was going to share about Mars. So we have a long history, if you go into our history of the stories, and then we have the modern era, and there's nothing there all those years. And, they're still there. The Anunnaki are still there. And then we have the reports from Andrew Basiago's paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, which was published 12/12 of 2008. And I've had Andy on our show a number of times, and he's described there's colonies there. There's that they are transporting through some kind of, what do they call that? He goes into like an elevator, and the next thing you know, you open the doors, and you're on Mars. The jump room, they call it the jump room. It's some kind of technology that our government has. And then there's stories from Stuart Swerdlow, who described, I think I had him on our show, but I also seen his lectures. I get confused where I get information. I get so much information. But he described how he had been back through time, and he was at the foot of Jesus as he was being, up on the cross. And then he took a sample, and he stuck the needle in his toe, and Jesus looked down at him and smiled. It was like he was given permission. And then he was taken to the Mars base underneath the face. There is a facility there where people were waiting for the sample, and he thought that they were going to use it for cloning for the return of Jesus in some kind of false flag scenario. I'm not sure what year he was sent back through time, but it was probably his involvement with Montauk ended in 1983, so it was probably somewhere in the 70s or 80s he was sent back in time to Jesus and then to Mars base. So we hear all these stories, and now we have the modern stories. I'm going to have Randy Kramer on our show on Sunday, and he's been talking about his 17 years involvement on Mars base, and he's going to go into great detail on Sunday on Revolution Radio, The Sacred Matrix, freedomslips.com. And there's somebody else, Corey Good, talking about the secret space program. So what do you think about all this, John? I mean, we have these NASA never a straight answer telling us all these stories and getting all excited about water when all this other stuff's been going on all along. What are your thoughts on that?
I've been pretty consistent with my view that, as much as our governments, our clandestine governments, our black ops governments, the Illuminati, etc., as much as they enjoy us not having the benefits of free technology, free energy, things like that, that it's not up to them, that it's up to ET. And ET is not ready for us to receive full disclosure yet. I think we as a planet are ready, but I don't think that ET is ready for us to go through full disclosure and, religious establishments crumbling and perhaps even governments crumbling. I don't really think it has to turn out that way. 911 Sasha was with us. Stephen D. Kelly was with us. Ed Baker was with us. Alfred Weber was with us. And I believe it was Stephen D. Kelly, presidential candidate, who said, if 3% of us as a planet, 3% of us get together, hold hands, and just send out love energy, that any negative force out there in the multiverse will lose their grip on us, because love comes from first. And I thought that was such a brilliant and profound statement that he made. I thought it was incredibly profound. But so one thing I did want to mention was that in history, Mars was known as the planet of war, and it does have this red glow to it that you can see with the naked human eye. And, it's been mythified, of course, but supposedly it's from the blood of all the wars. But one thing that was discovered by, I think it was the Pathfinder rover in 1997, is they found Xenon 129. And Xenon 129, which was found during where that impact crater was, which was 125 miles in diameter in the Leo region of Mars, that Xenon 129 comes specifically from nuclear explosions. And that, yes, and that in the Sumerian texts, let's see, what's his name, Sir Austin Henry Layard found the library of Ashurbanipal, and contained within those Sumerian cuneiform texts, it was speaking of wars on Mars between the gods.
Right.
And they're speaking of wars on Mars between the gods. And if we have nuclear capabilities going back to the 40s, well, of course, the Anunnaki had nuclear capabilities, perhaps even millions of years ago. And that's like an unspoken rule in the omniverse, that you don't use nukes, because it will mess up the kilter of a planet, perhaps an even entire solar system and galaxy, if you mess up a very important planet. So they were never to be used, but of course, they were used anyway. And they did find evidence of Xenon 129 all over the Mars surface, especially in that impact crater. That was something that I had wanted to bring up. I just learned that today. I was pretty amazed by that fact that I learned.
Is there anything else that causes Xenon 129, or is that only from nuclear holocaust?
It's specifically from hydrogen bombs. So, back in the 40s, we were testing in White Sands, New Mexico area, and they found it all over the desert. And they really didn't even know what it was, but they found it, analyzed it, and then created the name for it, not really knowing that it was a byproduct of a nuclear explosion. And they found an identical substance on the surface of Mars. And the scientist who mentioned it, his name is Dr. John Brandon, author of Life and Death on Mars. He said, based on our current human technology, this is the only thing that we know that can create Xenon 129 is a nuclear explosion, more specifically from a hydrogen bomb. So,
well, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think that's a good disclaimer, or just as far as we know, that's the only thing that creates it. But there might be others. However, that is interesting, because the same thing happened over in Sodom and Gomorrah. Where was it? In the Dr. List is not here, but he knows exactly where they found the radiation levels, and the Teflon, they call it Teflon or something. It's the soil itself has a certain characteristics where there's been a nuclear explosion, and the radioisotopes and all that stuff can be analyzed. And so they know that over there where Sodom and Gomorrah was, there were nuclear explosions, and then the wars continued into India. But it makes sense. They have the Mars base. And the first, you spoke back a little while ago, you said that one of the incoming passages of Nibiru or whatever was going on, something took away the atmosphere of Mars. But Andrew Basiago reports there still is a breathable atmosphere. And the Anunnaki record that one of the passings of Mars, it did do extreme disaster. It was actually Noah's flood. it created a great hardship on Mars, and so that's when the residents of Mars started to come down, and they got into some battles here. They wanted to have human wives because there were no women on Mars, and actually it was kind of funny. Back in the 50s, they made a very corny movie called Mars Needs Women with Tommy Kirk, and I remember watching it because I like Tommy. And it's hilarious.
Oh. Hello, Janet. Hello, Janet. Did I lose you?
Hold on.
Okay, I hear you now.
Okay. I don't know what's going on with our connection today. My apologies to listeners. Sometimes, say, crap happens. So, anyway, so we had some funny movies made in the 50s and 60s. That I've never really heard the nukes going to. See, they were very upset about the nuclear holocaust that happened during Sodom and Gomorrah because they had forgotten what nuclear power could do. And so everybody was running for the hills, and they lost several of the gods, and they didn't have too many of them to lose in the first place. There were less than 1,000 of them here on the Earth during those times. We're approximating from our research, and when a full Anunnaki was born, there was a huge celebration because somehow their fertility had been greatly adversely affected, might be a part of their longevity. You know, there's a big question. I talked to Dr. Aubrey de Grey of the Methuselah Foundation, and I think it's called SENS, S-E-N-S, his organization on physical immortality and longevity. And the question is, what do we do if we live forever? You know, what do we do if we have all of us are physically immortal? And looking at the Anunnaki information, which Dr. de Grey won't look at because he's a strict scientific scientist, right? But I'm just looking at the information. It seems that when a society is extremely long-lived, they're not able to perhaps have as many children, and so nature just takes care of itself that way. Anyway, back to you. That's just some of my thoughts I'm throwing out there. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, but to finish the point that we were discussing earlier is I believe what these scientists were trying to do was try to decipher or discern what stripped the atmosphere away from Mars. And since Mars is right next to Mars, basically is the corner of the asteroid belt. And to me and to a lot of scientists, the asteroid belt used to be a planet, and it was destroyed by ETs fighting over the planet and perhaps its resources. Nobody can be exactly sure. But, you know, it's within, you know, a reasonable scientific conclusion that it could possibly have been just a massive meteor. So then that's why they sent the rovers in there to go test the soil. And when they tested the soil, that's when they found the Xenon 129 and came to a conclusion that is not openly accepted by mainstream science whatsoever. But, you know, proof's in the pudding. That chemical, you know, is definitely proven to come from nuclear weapons, you know. And what their findings were is that an asteroid, comet, or meteor is not going to leave fallout that comes from a nuclear weapon. It's going to leave life matter that helps the planet to grow and create new plant life and things like that, like iridium. You've heard of the Serpent Mound in Ohio?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you see it from an aerial view, it's rather incredible. This long snake that winds through this part of Ohio, and then you see the mouth of the snake opening up and biting an egg or about to eat an egg. But right next to the Serpent Mound is a huge crater which is full of iridium. And iridium comes specifically from meteorites that are not from this planet. They come from other planets or asteroids or what have you. and iridium is used by NASA in the space shuttle missions. And so they didn't find any iridium in this crater site, and they were looking for it. So that was part of the evidence to either try to prove or try to disprove the theory of it being a meteorite or asteroid or being artificially created by nuclear weapons. So in my opinion, after listening to Dr. John Brandenburg, I believe in what he said. Jury's still out. NASA doesn't agree with it, but I think that his research is, less biased than NASA's, of course.
So I'm looking on this, I put in what stripped the atmosphere from Mars. So part of the people are saying that the Mars stripping was billions of years ago, a billion years ago. But we do have the story of the Anunnaki, and we know that they came here only 450,000 years ago. But they're also saying, what did I just say? That it's still being stripped away. So that might be, maybe it wasn't totally stripped away, but it is disappearing. Where is that? I think it says the solar winds. Okay, here, let me read this one. I'll just click it real quick. The atmosphere was ripped away and is being... Anyway, this is an interesting theory. It'd be great to have a Mars expert, but then we're not up there.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll change once we're up there with our little probes, and we're up there with our secret space program, but it was really good to have more information. I just hope I live long enough to get all these, it would be so good to have the answers to all these questions. I just would love to see it come out. And in my lifetime, I see all my friends dying. It's like, oh, goodness, I'm going to die when I got these secrets that have been there for, these have been mysteries all of my life, what's on Mars, what's going on there. And I know Tesla took his very too, he had contacts. And I would just like to see disclosure happen. I'm really right for it. I think it's time. But
it is.
Who knows what's happened? Who knows? Yeah.
It is. But what I find interesting, let's say it was 1 billion years ago. Did you ever watch that documentary video done by Michael Rhinehart called Forbidden Archaeology?
I have not watched it. I've seen him present. I've, sat down and had meals with him. He's a wonderful person. Highly recommend going to a conference and meeting him.
Me too.
And tell me about the what did you take with you about the documentary that you watched on hidden archaeology?
Well, we know that forbidden archaeology is basically archaeology that has been discovered and or proven that goes against mainstream archaeology. So instead of them acknowledging that, Earth could potentially have had life 50, 100, few 100,000 years ago, anything that goes against their thinking is basically coined as forbidden archaeology and immediately discounted and ridiculed by, mainstream archaeology. But Michael Rhinehart loves to fight with them and loves to argue and debate with them, and he's good. He is sharp as a tack and has a steel trap memory also. So he would not be any fun if you're some kind of empirical scientist to argue with whatsoever. But during his lecture, which I got on a DVD, he comes up with an artifact, and he says, you see this artifact? Let's look at it. And you can tell that it was intelligently created and had like some kind of artistic design in it. And he said, guess how old this artifact is? He said, this artifact is 1 billion years old, and it was found in North America. So how long has life been on Earth? How long has the human creation story been on our planet? I think it's been, and I think, yes, the Anunnaki came here 450,000 years ago, but they were probably here even longer ago than that, maybe to the tune of millions of years ago, and did the human creation story over and over again. When the planet became uninhabitable through ice ages or what have you, then they would pull out, and then it become habitable again. 10,000, 12,000 years later, they would come back and do the whole human creation story all over again. So I think the human creation story has been going on and on and on and on for at least millions and millions of years.
Oh, yes. We're not, they're just the latest group, and they're not the only humanoid group that's been here. And so looking back in the whole history of the universe, we have the Lyrians, which apparently were a humanoid race. Some people say they were a lionic race, looked like a lion, a cat race. And so but this DNA is in all of us. They apparently have been coming here. DNA doesn't belong to anyone in particular. It seems to be like the paints or the colors of the universe. So that it's just a material to mix and match and be creative and combine in your own creative way. So that's what happened when they were going to the planet Serpo. The gray is a gray species, so it's not one of the big eyes. It was a little bit different. There was an exchange program, and one of the humans died, and they just couldn't adjust to whatever was going on, the conditions on the ship, and he died. It was a male, and the rest of the crew said, "Well, where's his body?" And the gray species had already, taken all the DNA, and they were doing all kinds of experiment with it, and they're going, wait, that's not what you do with human bodies. You're supposed to bury it and do ritual and this and that. And they were shocked at the gray species, and they just said, well, it's just DNA that we get to use, from a new species, and we've already made, 50 new species because they use the DNA. So Heinlein used to say no one owns their DNA, and I wonder, I was reading that back in the 60s and 70s, I go, what does he mean by nobody owns their DNA? And here we have this story. That's where I think some of the disclosure slips out into science fiction. And he's saying that, the DNA belongs to the universe and that people can use it and combine it and make it into species. Now, of course, the people that are being, taken on board ship and they get their sperm and eggs taken are probably protesting, and some of them are okay with it. But apparently that's some kind of universal law of the Confederation that no one owns their DNA, and so apparently they've been, coming here and trying to create what? I'm imagining they wanted to create some kind of super species. And what I get from my downloads is they wanted to create a species that can hold heaven on earth, meaning the highest level of dimension, highest vibrational frequency, and once again holding the lowest, like 3D density vibrational frequency, without the soul that inhabits the form, the body, experiencing death. So that's what I'm getting from my download. So back to you.
I would agree with that totally, but I think it goes even further, and you brought this up earlier, where the Anunnaki, not all of them, but some of them are at the point where they can't reproduce. So what them and other species are doing, they've evolved so much, or they've cheated time so much through their technology of basically a genesis of every single cell in their body, recreating the cells in their body, and eventually I'm assuming that just has to catch up with any kind of organic body to the point where some of them can't reproduce anymore. So what I think they're doing is getting genetic material from us and breeding part of our genetics back into their genomes so that they can, have intercourse and can have babies without going to a laboratory and create them in some kind of, plasmatic kind of jelly sack. And I think that's part of this experiment, which is in effect a program also. And something else that some of the ETs are doing right now is some of them don't have a soul, and they're really curious of what happens to our soul. So they will abduct some of us who will never come back to Earth again, put us in these bio chambers, and basically, if they kill us, it messes with the karma and the chi of the soul. So they basically keep us in this incubation chamber until we die. And when we die, then they follow our soul to see where it's going. just out of their own curiosity. You know, we as humans, if we are scientists and want to perform scientific experiments, well, of course they do. And in effect, they're probably the ones that taught us most of the science that we know today. But I know that's another program that they have going on right now is to find out what a soul is.
Program. Where did you read this? What, is this a book or something, or where did you find this information?
It came to me in a download. I could see it. This is one of those where was I on a ship or not? I can't be exactly sure. I've been on spaceships before, but I don't like to say definitely unless I'm definitely positive that I was. It could have just been a download and or a vision or a dream. But I can remember being in a ship, and then I see these ETs, and they were asexual. I couldn't tell that they had, any obvious gender traits to them. Kind of tall. They weren't your typical short grays, and they weren't typically gray. They were more like an off kind of, strange color. But anyway, I could see these biochambers that looked like they were made out of glass, but they weren't. And I could see human beings inside of them. They were naked, and they had they didn't have a breathing apparatus on them. I know that they've created some kind of fluid that humans can actually respirate in, and they won't suffocate.
From different people, Nigel Kerner. I don't know if you ever read a book called what's this book called? I had him on about a year ago or so, and he has a similar story.
Really?
Called The Great Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls. And we're going to be ending our show in 4 minutes, so we can set this up for another show. Very fascinating.
Oh, let's do it.
And that also sounds like I highly recommend you look at and listen to the interviews of Errol the Grey and what's it book called? It's another book about Errol the Grey and the nurse at Roswell, and I can't think of it. I've done the show before a couple of times. Once again, this was over a year, and that story, Errol the Grey at Roswell with the nurse who, the nurse wrote a book about her contact with the Greys. That one, if you can remember that one. The two of them, they correlate with that, but they're slightly different. The Errol the Grey said that we're in a prison planet, and they know where souls go, they trap them. And there's no way out of this matrix. It seems to be everybody's locked in, including a group of their Grey souls accidentally got locked into it when they came down and settled into, this was thousands of years ago, like 10,000 years ago. And then they weren't able to, when they died there, they weren't able to escape. Or there's something that happened, they got killed, and that's why the Greys, the Errol Grey type Greys, are really interested in helping humanity evolve because, thousands of their own Grey souls are trapped in this time warp. But I have not had the time to read. It's called Grey Aliens and the Harvesting of Souls, A Conspiracy to Genetically Tamper with Humanity by Nigel Kerner, Kerner. I'm on his site, nigelkerner.com. I highly recommend, John, that you read this. And it would be great if you would, I'm going to give you an assignment, I'm horrible that way, if you would correlate those three references, your own download, if you break that up with this Nigel Kerner and the Errol the Grey information. That sounds like a fascinating show, and I'd love to schedule that somewhere in the near future.
Nigel Kerner?
Nigel Kerner, he's a lovely man. He came on our show. It was 2 a.m. for him, and he gave us 2 hours. And unfortunately, that show got lost because Revolution Radio got hijacked. The YouTube ones got deleted by some reason. I think that one got lost. I'll have to have him come on again. But I'm going to have to wrap up this show, and how about we'll just call it a day, John, and we'll do this again next week. Okay?
Okay, I look forward to it, and I'll contact you throughout the week and look forward to our next conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much. Much love and blessings, and aloha. And thank you, listeners. This is Janet Carol Lesson at radio.com.